Roquan Smith is going to be a fascinating story to watch on draft night because despite all of his talent, all of his great tape, and all of his awards and accolades, he still could be in for a huge fall in the first round. And what's most interesting, or maybe most upsetting about that, is that if he does fall way further than most people expect, it won't even be his own fault. Smith is the linebacker version of a scalpel in a league where a lot of teams are still trying to find hammers. He's fast, fluid, and has fantastic instincts and tackling technique, but unfortunately he has one fatal physical flaw that many coaches around the league still just will not accept. He cannot, in any capacity, take on blocks at the point of attack. Game after game, the same pattern emerged as both a strength and a weakness for the Georgia defense. When offenses tried to exploit the edges and test Roquan in space, he shut them down extremely quickly and efficiently, but when they tested him up the middle and forced him to take on blocks by himself, there were a lot of yards to be gained. The Rose Bowl against Oklahoma was probably Smith's worst matchup of the year in terms of exposing his most crippling weakness. Whether it was Orlando Brown or Ben Powers or Eric Wren, that entire offensive line blew Smith off the ball every time they engaged him. Smith just did not have the length or the strength to stack and shed any of those blocks, which is the unlucky price he pays for also being so twitchy and light on his feet in space. As good as he is outside the box where his speed can really shine, he's equally vulnerable inside the box where everything turns into a meat grinder. One play in particular early in the second quarter of that game was probably the best representation of that trade-off. It's a simple inside zone run out of the shotgun, but it's to the weak side, not the strong side. Now, Oklahoma is running this inside zone to the weak side on purpose because when they run it to the weak side, Baker Mayfield identifies Roquan as the Mike, also known as the middle linebacker. The actual middle linebacker on the Georgia depth chart, Reggie Carter, is then on the backside of this play because it's being run away from him. That means that Carter is in pursuit and cleanup duty, which is usually Smith's job, while Smith is supposed to take on the block from the center at the point of attack, which is usually Carter's job. Just by flipping which direction the play is going, Oklahoma is forcing Georgia's linebacking core to flip their responsibilities, and neither one of these linebackers are comfortable doing that. So at the start of the play, you've got the center, Eric Wren, first looking at the two-technique defensive tackle so that he can help out his left guard pass off if he needs to, which he does not, and then once the defensive tackle is secured, Wren immediately starts looking for the Mike backer that Mayfield identified, which as I said is now Smith. On a typical zone run like this, a Mike linebacker's responsibility is to stack on Wren on the second level while also gaining ground laterally down the line of scrimmage. Ideally, you want to put one arm into that blocker's chest so you can get a length advantage while peeking over his outside shoulder to look for the running back. Maintaining that separation with a one-arm stab will keep you off the block so that you can make a tackle in this front side crease if you need to, without completely hindering your ability to stop and shed into the cutback lane if necessary. Here's the problem though, Smith is not long or strong enough to stack on a lineman and still give himself the option to shed in both directions. He is not big enough to keep that center out of his chest, and he knows it, and Oklahoma knows it too. That's why they're running directly at him in the first place. So instead of stacking on the center and getting to his assignment over the top of the block like a middle linebacker is supposed to do, Smith tries to go underneath the block and get to the ball that way. This is called backdooring, which can work sometimes. We see Aaron Donald and Jadeveon Clowney and Telvin Smith do it all the time, but it is not something a Mike linebacker should be doing. A Mike backer's one job is to close the front door so that everyone else can smash through the back door and ruin the play, but Smith is not strong enough to do that. He is physically incapable of holding that front door closed, which is why for a lot of teams his grade is going to be a lot lower. He didn't even play Mike at Georgia because they knew his limitations, and multiple opponents ran right at him to exploit that. Now, all of that being said, knowing that he cannot play middle linebacker, or at least should not, what can he do? If I'm a general manager and I want to try to find a way to fit his skill set into my team, what role will he play? To me, there's really only one option, and that's the weak side linebacker, also known as the will linebacker. He played this role at Georgia, and it's literally the exact same role that you see similarly sized guys like Telvin Smith and Levante David play in the NFL. They're all relatively small by traditional linebacker standards, but they're fast, rangy, fluid, and can rack up an obscene amount of tackles if they are kept clean, meaning unblocked. And as fast as Telvin and Levante are, Roquan Smith plays even faster. His closing speed on both runs and passes to the edges is insane. If I'm a defensive coordinator who has a front seven that gets taken advantage of by speed outside the hashes, Roquan is the guy that I want more than anyone else. His range can cover for a lot of mistakes all over the field, and again, as long as he is kept clean, he can lead your team in tackles literally every week. There was a great example of that range early in the SEC championship game against Auburn. The Tigers are running a gap run to the strong side B gap off of the QB keeper action, which is something they do all the time, and Georgia is pretty used to seeing it. To stop this, defensive tackle Trenton Thompson beats Auburn right tackle Braden Smith inside and shuts down the B gap immediately. Mikhail Carter also does a great job of clogging everything up and absorbing bodies in front of Roquan on the other side as well, so now Smith is completely clean and he can just read and react to whatever the running back decides to do. With the B-gap taken away by Thompson and all the other interior lanes clogged as well, Cam Martin, the running back, has no choice but to try to bounce this run outside and get the edge. Bulldogs outside linebacker Lorenzo Carter does a pretty poor job of playing contain here. He's not in a good position to choke off Martin's angle, so it's looking like Martin is going to have a pretty easy time getting outside and turning this into a huge play. That is, until Roquan Smith gets involved. Smith has the raw speed to race Martin to the sideline and win that race so that he can make the tackle and hold this run to just a 7-yard gain rather than a potential 30-yard touchdown. Like I said, when you've got a linebacker with the kind of range and burst that Roquan Smith has, he can cover for a lot of the mistakes made by the rest of your defense. This role is where he is most comfortable by far, tracking down speedy offensive skill players in space and limiting their big play capability. As long as he is used in that kind of position, just like the Jaguars use Telvin Smith in the same way, he can easily be a Pro Bowl linebacker and put up ridiculous numbers. But, just like the Jags did with Telvin, Roquan's future team needs to give him support. He is going to need a dominant interior defensive lineman like Calais Campbell to absorb bodies and soak up all the attention. He's going to need a steady, reliable brick of a human being to take on blocks for him in the middle like Paul Posluszny and Miles Jack did. He needs his defensive coordinator and his general manager to do everything they can to protect him within the scheme so that he can protect everyone else. When looking at all of his potential destinations in the draft this year, the fact that he is so reliant on scheme means that he could be in store for a big and perhaps undeserved fall. Among the top 10 teams, only the 49ers and Raiders have the personnel and scheme to maybe possibly be a fit for him, and I don't really see any teams that I think could be a truly great fit until the Packers at 14. They have 3 incredibly talented starting defensive linemen there with Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark, and Mo Wilkerson, and if all 3 of them are playing at their best, I can't imagine Roquan Smith ever getting any blocking attention again. He would be so far down on the food chain that he could just roam free and make tackle after tackle after tackle with zero restraints, which again is the ideal scenario for his skill set. The more beef he's got in front of him, the more valuable he is. In a similar vein, I think the Ravens, Seahawks, and Steelers are all fits for him as well. All of them have the personnel and scheme in place to free him up to do what he does best, which to me is way more important than what his overall grade is. He can easily be one of the 15 best players in this class, but if he doesn't fit, he doesn't fit. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that this top 15 type of player falls all the way down to Pittsburgh at 28. At the end of the day though, regardless of where he ends up, I think Smith is going to be a very productive player. You don't take a linebacker with this specific of a skill set without having a plan in place. No team is going to suddenly confuse a scalpel for a hammer just because he's high up on their board. If they take him, it's for a reason, and if they take him in the first round, you can be damn sure that they will build their team around him so that he can be as successful as possible. Is his ceiling as high as Tremaine Edmunds? No, not even remotely close. But does it really have to be? If I know what I'm getting from day one and I commit to empowering that style of player to the best of my ability as a general manager, can he still at least be as productive as Edmunds? Well, yeah, he could, and probably would be. As much as I like to play up the fact that Edmunds is so insanely gifted, not every first-round pick has to be a freak of nature. Not every franchise cornerstone needs to be the biggest, fastest, strongest guy in the room. Sometimes it's worth it to take the guy that you just know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is going to do his job. Roquan Smith might not be the flashiest show in town, but at least you know he's worth the price of admission. And in the end, when you're using a first-round pick on someone, being worth that price is the only thing that actually matters. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. Roquan has definitely been one of the most loudly requested players for me to talk about on this show. There's a lot of Georgia fans on this channel, apparently. And I hope I was able to properly convey how much I really like him, but also how much he still might fall in the first round just because of that scheme dependency. He could still go in the top 10, don't get me wrong, but don't be surprised if he falls into the late 20s either. His draft range is all over the place, and his eventual destination is probably not going to be one of the teams we expect. And speaking of that, I've got yet another mock draft coming out today for all of my Patreon supporters. This is the first one that I'm releasing since the Jets traded up to number 3, so I've got a new top 5. And with that trade, of course, the entire complexion of the first round is going to change, so if you want to see how I think everything shakes out as of today, head on over to my Patreon in the link in the description and check that out. There is no minimum donation to see all of my mock drafts. It could be $1, $5, $10, whatever you want to do. Any amount gets you the same exact access while also supporting what we do on this channel and helping us grow and pay my bills so that I can keep doing this. So thank you very much to everyone who has already donated. Thank you to everyone who is about to donate, and I will be back next week with another episode. So until then, later.